Hi, I'm Nineveh Madsen, founder and CEO of Her Magazine, and I'm an outlier.
Hey everybody, welcome to Outlier on Air, the podcast where we interview founders, disruptors, and mavens. As always, I'm your host, Ever Gonzalez. On today's episode, we have Nineveh Madsen. She is the founder and CEO of Her Magazine. Nineveh, welcome to the show.
Hey, I'm so excited to be on. Thank you.
Yeah, we're excited to have you on for a million different reasons, right? You're somewhat of a local here, anyway, in our state anyway. I know we're quite a few miles away, but we'd love featuring people from Utah, entrepreneurs from Utah, obviously because we live here, has a special place in our heart. And you are leading the way when it comes to a few different topics. So we're going to get into that here in just a bit. But to paint the picture, tell us where you're calling us from right now.
I am calling you from Sandy, Utah, where it is so foggy or smoggy, depending on how you want to look at it. No, it's definitely a lot of smog. It's freezing, so I'm sure there in southern Utah, it's a lot nicer. 23 degrees.
Jeez. Yeah, I don't know how you do it, but you do it. I guess somebody has to do it, and there you are. So now, what's the vibe there in Sandy and surrounding areas when it comes to startups and entrepreneurial? What's the vibe up there right now?
You know what? I'm a part of a couple of boards. So the Utah Women's Business Center. So I'd say I'm heavily engaged in the entrepreneurial space, especially the female entrepreneurial space. And I would say there's a huge desire right now for women in Utah to pave their own way and to, set their own rules. And there's a lot happening out here. And maybe people outside of Utah would be surprised to hear that. But I think there's a lot of innovation happening here, not just in the entrepreneurial space, but even entrepreneurs in the tech space. So I'm pretty engaged with the community, and I see a huge group of women that just have this thirst for knowledge and wanting to know more, because I've held a couple of workshops for women business owners, and there seems to be a lack of resources and things like that here. And I think, for example, the Utah Women's Business Center is really trying hard to forge the way and provide those resources. So I just see a lot of women wanting to do it their way and wanting to get out of the corporate environment, or maybe it's women who stayed at home and they want to do something else now because their kids are grown. So I think Utah and Salt Lake in particular is just has a great foundation for entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs. They're hungry to do something different.
It's funny, for the last 10 years or so, Northern Utah has been making a lot of noise, but specifically the last few years, I mean, it seems to have exploded to the point where it's getting national and global attention, like you mentioned, for female entrepreneurs, for tech companies, for a lot of different reasons, a lot of good talent, young talent there coming out of Northern Utah. But it's kind of like a mecca for talented, hungry entrepreneurs to live there, but also be able to kind of balance that whole life work problem that so many of these other locations have. San Francisco, Austin, LA, those type of things. Why is it? I mean, it feels like you can be up there in Northern Utah, do some amazing things, work for some amazing companies, start great companies, but also be able to have a little bit of a family life as well.
Yeah,
that's the read that we get anyway.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you're looking at some of these cities like Miami or New York or LA, and in terms of like women especially, they're hyper focused on their careers and excelling in those areas. And here in Utah, obviously, there's a real emphasis on the importance of family. Like for me, I'm 36, going on 37, pregnant right now.
Congratulations.
So, thank you. I'm one of those women that waited. I embarked on a career, and I was really conscious about making decisions that led me down a path to where career was going to be number one. But then I realized in my 30s, I'm like, oh my gosh, if I keep going down this path, like I'm going to be one of those women that, just had a career and nothing else. And so that's what I love about Utah. I think family's is, a really important factor. So the type of entrepreneurs that you see here versus the type of entrepreneurs you may find in the Bay Area, for example, are different for sure. So you see a lot of women who are influencers online, like they've been able to build a huge digital following, maybe in the, mommy space, or, the decorating house space, whatever, design space. But
sure.
You see a lot of that where family is somehow involved in their business. And so I think you see different types of entrepreneurs here in the female space that you would see in an LA or New York or Bay Area, where a lot of women out there are, heavily focused on building maybe big business and going after VC funding. And things like that.
And it's perfect. And now that you're expecting your first child, and I mean, it kind of comes full circle where now you're building your own empire there with Her Magazine, and we'll get into the details here in just a sec. But now that I'm assuming that you're seeing work and life and everything else, or at least starting to see it in a new light, right? We kind of hustle as young entrepreneurs, and we're working long hours. Has there been a transition with you in the recent past?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, getting pregnant, my husband and I actually struggled for 3 years. So we had to go through several rounds of IVF, and it was just been a crazy, tough journey for us. And so finally getting here and it happening, and here I am, and it's like I'm due in March, and I go, oh my gosh. So I've had to reassess a lot of things, because when you're pregnant, everything seems to slow down. You get overwhelmed a lot easier. And I've definitely had that thought process of, how am I going to juggle this, And so, it's not to say like, hey, women have it harder than men, but these are definitely thoughts that I'm having as I'm making the transition. So what I've noticed is I just not putting more projects on my plate. I'm realizing that this is probably not the time to try to scale my business. This is a time to maintain it. And once I feel comfortable, then I can go full speed again.
I love it. Now let's dive right into it. Talk to us about Her Magazine.
Her Magazine was founded a couple of years ago. So I worked in the news business for over 10 years, and here in Salt Lake City for 8 years for one of the local affiliates, and loved it, enjoyed it. I've always loved storytelling. I'm a journalist at heart, but one of the things that I wasn't too fond of after a decade in the news business is just how negative and toxic it can be. That's not to say the news business is bad or anything like that. I have tremendous respect for journalists, but for me, I got to a point in my career where I wasn't feeling inspired by the stories that I was telling anymore. It was the same thing, things that are necessary to let the public know about, like the fires and the murders and, all the terrible, horrible things that are happening out there. I was the one reporting on that. And after a decade, I just felt myself going through a transition, and I got into personal growth. I got into personal development. And that year that I was really into reading the books, from Robert Kiyosaki and Bob Proctor and Tony Robbins and all these, great philosophers, it sort of pulled me into this different direction. I started to evolve as a person, and that new person was in conflict with the news girl.
Really?
And yeah, it didn't fit. It was like oil and vinegar, right?
But you were sorry for interrupting there, but you were so good at it. I mean, you were award-winning anchor, and you received, these awards, and obviously just having a job, right, is important with steady paychecks and things like that. And so that push was strong enough to start thinking about, well, maybe I need to stop this, something I'm great at, to something somewhat new.
Well, and here's the thing. I had some major career aspirations. When I started the news business, the truth is I wanted to work in LA or New York, or it was all or nothing, and I'm an all or nothing kind of a person. And so when I met my husband, John Madsen, he's an entrepreneur. He owns a gym. My father's also an entrepreneur, so I think definitely the two of them had a lot of influence on me in terms of like my decision making. But I knew that, okay, I'm staying in Salt Lake. I know that I've got this new show, and it just hit me. I'm like, is this it? Is this all? So I'm basically just going to be an anchor. I'm going to read this prompter. And yeah, I understand. I appreciate saying like, hey, I'm good at, what I was doing, but it wasn't enough because for me, being a news anchor wasn't about being on television for me. I've been out of the business for almost 3 years now. So I also wanted to discover who I was outside of being on camera. What if I just detached myself completely, my ego completely? Who would I be without all of that? I didn't want to like center my entire identity around being on television because I worked around so many people in the TV industry and I saw that happening to them. And that's really the worst way that you can operate is needing admiration or needing people to, tell you that you're good so that you can feel good about yourself. I mean, that's just not a good place to be in, but more so than anything else, honestly, ever, it was just, I wasn't feeling inspired anymore. And knowing that I wasn't going to continue progressing in my career because I was staying in Salt Lake, that's how I came up with the idea of Her Magazine. I thought there's a real need for empowering women, and I'm feeling disempowered as a woman right now. And so I just was literally on the couch after a meditation one morning, and I thought of this idea. I should start a digital magazine and create content that I wish I could do on the news, but for some reason, I'm not able to because I've been pegged into this corner that I'm a hard news journalist. And to be able to transition into this new type of reporting would have been really tough. And it was something that I brought up with my bosses, by the way. I said, I'm feeling myself change. I'm not happy. I'm sorry to bring this up in the middle of a contract, but I feel myself evolving and I want to do stories like this and like this. And they said, okay, we understand. We hear you, but you're a hard news journalist. You're a political reporter. That's what you are. And I thought, but I don't want to be that anymore. Not right now. So the magazine was just purely a creative outlet. It wasn't like I had these crazy plans to start a business. It was because that creative outlet wasn't being given to me at work. I decided to create it on my own. And when I was told that it was not okay to do that.
Really?
Yeah. When it just seemed, it wasn't okay, for whatever reason. And I thought, I'm Middle Eastern. Nobody tells me what to do. And I don't like being told what to do, believe me. And as in the way I was as a news reporter, by the way, just totally hardcore, would ask you any question, just had guts. That's the way that I was around my management too. So, I wasn't one person out in the field and, strong and outspoken and fearless, and then had a totally different personality in the newsroom. So I would always tell my bosses that, look, you can't expect me to be this, badass. Can I say that?
Yeah,
on
absolutely.
a podcast?
Yes.
Out there, and then not be the same person in here. So when you're telling me this isn't okay, we're concerned about this, it makes me just want to do it more. When somebody says no, I'm like, I'll prove you that I can. So that's just how it all it wasn't the plan to leave the news business, but I felt like I had something. That just fueled me further to continue with the magazine. And so a couple issues came out while I was working in the business. And I just walked in there one day and I woke up one morning. I looked at my husband and I said, I'm done.
Really?
I'm quitting today. And he's like, well, really? Are you sure? Yeah. Because if I don't make this decision now, I'm not going to make the decision. I'm going to just float through the rest of my life. I have to just go in there and do it.
And so obviously the name of the magazine, Her Magazine, right? But
yeah.
What do you focus on? Is it monthly, right? It's how often?
Yeah, it's a monthly magazine. And then on our website, hermag.co, we have at least 3 articles a week that are published. And we recently made the transition of making the magazine completely free because I want women everywhere to be able to access this kind of content. And we focus strictly on the career woman and the entrepreneurial women. So all the articles are geared towards either providing advice on things like marketing, PR, how to get media attention, things that can help them scale their businesses. We talk about like SEO, just, things that we all struggle with as business owners, marketing. And then we also highlight a lot of women in business as well, all across the country. And also we just had our first international cover out of the UK.
Nice.
So I'm just wanting to introduce the women of Utah and women everywhere that are accessing this magazine digitally that, look, this is what women are doing. So if you have this thought of wanting to be an entrepreneur, wanting to go out there and you think it's going to be hard, it is hard, but other women are doing it. Let me give you an example of who's, paving the way and the struggles that they've been through so that you don't feel alone and you feel encouraged and inspired to go out there and build a business yourself.
It's funny because so it's her magazine. You feature female entrepreneurs, but the content can relate to anybody. I mean, male entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs, young, old. There's some good stuff on there, right? Something that can help us get to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. We share a ton of articles that I feel like men would relate to as well because we talk about business. I mean, the only difference is we're not featuring male entrepreneurs, and that's not to say that we wouldn't want to. I just feel like men have plenty of magazines out there. But we're also featuring women that are just change makers. For example, we just had an article about an amputee model who's, challenging beauty standards. And, we have, silly articles like shopping tips to stay out of the red on Black Friday. That's just an example. We'll have things like that. But business-wise, we talk about even taboo topics like direct sales. So we just had an article come out recently about how to rock direct sales without scaring away all your friends. Because I'm not in direct sales, but I recognize, especially here in Utah and in many other states.
It's huge here in Utah for some reason.
It is. And I'm thinking to myself, MLM shouldn't feel so icky. It shouldn't be so icky. I think the problem is how they're taught to market the product that is scaring people away. So let's kind of break open this topic and talk about it because I don't want women to feel alienated. It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. You should be celebrated for the fact of just wanting to go out there and do something on your own, Other articles that we tap into is like how to be a great communicator, tips on how to get media attention, we started a new section, a technology section. So, we look at what are some cool apps that every entrepreneur needs, things like that. So
how big is the team?
How big is the team? So I have all contractors right now.
Nice.
So no employees, freelance writers. We have at least 5 to 7 freelancers at any given time. Those are paid freelance writers. And then we have contributors as well, although because I worked in the news business, I'm really picky about the content and the writing. And the cool thing is I really don't do any of the writing. I'll release one article a month, like letter from the founder, but I'm really behind the scenes, like moving the engine now. And so we have a team of, when I'm counting our graphic designer and assistants and writers, 10 to 12 people at any given time that are working on the magazine and the website and everything.
What's the goal with the magazine?
The goal right now for me is what I call user acquisition. So I am merely in the phase of building the brand, building the readership. It's one of the reasons why I decided to go from a paid subscription model to completely the freemium model. And so it's just getting as many eyeballs as I can, building a community, a tribe of women who trust Her magazine and me behind it. And that way, when we're ready to scale and, start making money, and we're not making money right now, we make money on the back end, and I can explain that later, but we'll have something to sell them eventually. So the plan is we may get into e-commerce, we may get into, selling products to them that would appeal to them as a female entrepreneur, but we're certainly not, I've kind of geared away from this, thought of making money off content. It's pretty tough to make money off content. So the business model for news is, we were creating content and then we had advertisers and sponsors, right? that's something that I looked into. Was one of the things that I didn't like about being a journalist. And then I faced that decision in my business too, where I thought, I've got to bring in some revenue. So I'm just going to go out there and get sponsors and advertisers. I'm going to go the old fashioned way. The problem, though, is they then can control the kind of content that you put out there.
Agreed.
Right? You have to promise them, okay, for X amount of money, we'll give you X amount of articles a year. We'll blah, blah, blah. And I thought that's what I hated about the news business. So why am I applying the same, philosophy to my business? And so we went out there, and it was probably about 3 months where me and a team, two other women sales team, basically a small sales force, went out there talking to people about sponsoring, and we generated a lot of interest. But at the end of the day, I thought, I don't need sponsorship dollars. I think all I need is to build a base that loves our content and that wants to support this mission of ours as a magazine, which is to unmake tradition. It's to kind of disrupt the idea of what and who women are, right? It's been a lot of great feedback, and so we've been able to make money off workshops and clients, on the back end, and that's how we're generating revenue right now.
It's funny. I think we're doing the similar things with our podcast. In the beginning, I thought we're close to 400 episodes. We've been doing this for 3.5, almost 4 years. And in the beginning, I was like, we're just going to get people to sponsor the show, and we did, and it always felt a little bit icky. And you're right, I didn't want any strings attached to the podcast, so we don't make money on the podcast, but we make money because of the podcast, right? Our reach is larger. It's a global podcast. We have listeners from all over the world, but we make money because they hire us for PR, or when we hold events, they come and they buy tickets, those type of things. So it's a good move. And it's going to pay off. I mean, it might be tough at times, right? Especially in the beginning, but it's going to pay off in the end for sure.
Right. I mean, it has to be a long-term vision, long-term, goals here. We're looking 10 years down the line. What will Her magazine be? Not what is it going to be in the first couple of years? I mean, you read a lot of stories about entrepreneurs, and overnight successes, and that happens, but it's really rare. The typical entrepreneur goes through a decade of a journey before they really start to see that ROI, that return of investment. So I think the toughest part about being a business owner, an entrepreneur, or having a side hustle, or whatever you want to call it, is that it does take time, it takes patience, and it takes investing money into it too, right? You have to be willing to take that risk. And, we spend a ton of money every month creating great content for people, just because I'm passionate about stories, I'm passionate about storytelling, and I'm passionate about creating a resource for women that they can come to us and learn about business and different topics without having to pay for it. Because I know how hard it is at the beginning when you just need that knowledge, or you need to be part of a group or a tribe that's going to kind of take you in the right direction.
I love it. I'm sure there are a lot of listeners right now nodding their heads, completely understanding the whole process and the end game, right? And it's maybe it's not going to take off tomorrow, but being consistent and putting out great content is going to definitely pay off. Now, Her magazine, it's kind of your side hustle. I mean, I know it's your baby, and I know you're passionate about it, and obviously the goal is to continue to grow it, but it's not your full-time job right now anyway. What else are you doing?
No, it's not. So here's what happened. So I was working in TV and had come out with this magazine. My dad, like I had mentioned, he owns a tech company in California. He's been an entrepreneur for 30 years. And I actually remember in high school when he tried to convince me to work for him at the time. He owned another company and he wanted me to get into marketing. And I thought, I'll come work for you. And I think I was getting paid like $8 an hour. And I lasted a couple months. I was so bored. Wow. I was just so bored with whatever it was that he was having me doing. And I thought, I love you, Dad, but I'm not going to work for you. So he's like, all right, you don't have to take my advice. And I had this real need to just be independent of my family, my parents. I wanted to like move out as fast as possible. So that's what I did. I mean, let's see, my first job was working at a gift shop, wrapping presents and doing the cashier register. Like I said, I worked for my father for a couple months, got bored out of my mind and thought, this would be terrible. I already hate that my parents tell me what to do. Working for a family member, might drive me crazy. So for a long time, I obviously had my own career, did my own thing, but I think I sparked my father's interest when I was not only working in the news industry, and he said, we really need someone who's well-versed in the media industry to work at our company. I said, no, I'm not interested. Then I launched the magazine, and he's like, oh, I see you're entrepreneurial too. And I said, I am. And he goes, well, why don't you just manage our social media accounts? I'll be your first consulting client. How's that? And I said, okay. I don't have a lot of time. What are you talking about here? Manage your social media accounts. I don't know that I know much about social media except for growing my own pages. And he said, just work for us like 10 hours a week. Like, I'll give you $2,000 a month to manage our social media accounts. I'm like, wow, $2,000 for 10 hours a week. And that shifted listen, I think that's a lot of money for 10 hours a week. Okay.
Sure, absolutely.
It shifted I had a paradigm shift where I thought I could get paid $2,000 a month as a consultant, of course, then I'd have to pay taxes on that. So it's a lot less, but again, 10 hours a week, $2,000. And then I looked at what I was making in the news business and I thought if I could get a couple more clients, I could replace my salary easily, just a couple more social media clients. So that got my wheels turning and thinking, this is how I can do the magazine. So he was one of my first clients. And then I was just he was a consulting client for years while I worked with other clients here locally and holding workshops and doing events. And he came to me about 3 months ago and said, we just really love your expertise in the marketing and PR arena. Why don't you be the VP of marketing and PR for our company? And here's the deal. You can work from home and you can telecommute. You can come here every other month and work out of the office. But because he's tech, he's got teams in the Bay Area, Ukraine. So they're worldwide. And all of the work is done remotely. And so I agreed because I just thought this will be a neat opportunity while I'm pregnant, having kids, to still do the magazine, but have a better income coming in and not having to do the hustle and the struggle. That's a lot of work, and especially with two people. Like my husband is an entrepreneur and I'm an entrepreneur. And as you know, when you're an entrepreneur, the amount of money that you're making is good and then it sucks.
Yes.
So there's no stability there. And I thought I need stability. So
you worked it up. You've worked it out perfectly. You can still do the normal. I mean, I guess it's not even normal because you're only working 10 hours a week, but the steady. I'm
working only 10 hours a week now. That was
back then. Yeah. But now it's a lot more now, right?
Yeah. It's full time now, but the deal was I'll come work for you as long as I can still have my magazine because he said, you need to decide what you're going to do with this magazine. I said, well, don't make me make a decision that my former employer made me make because you'll know what the answer is.
Yes.
The deal is that I get to do this as long as it doesn't impact, what I do for you. And so, I'm working full time. But the great thing about my father and who he is as an entrepreneur and as a boss is he gives all of his employees a lot of autonomy. So they can work from home, they can telecommute, they can come to the office. He's just got a new way of thinking when it comes to building business and recognizing the gig economy and recognizing that people need the freedom to create. And he doesn't believe in the concept of 9 to 5. Like you get here at 9 in the morning and you leave at 5 o'clock. You worked your 8 hours. Good job. To him, he's more result oriented. So whether you worked 10 hours that day or 3 hours that day doesn't make a difference to him. It's how are you moving the needle is what matters to him, which I think is a really neat concept and corporate America can learn from. He's just got a different philosophy. So it's interesting to learn from him as a business owner of how he leads his team, how he inspires them. and all the different challenges he faces as a business owner. But at the same time, since I'm leading an entire department and building it from the ground up, there's still a lot of like entrepreneurship involved in that role.
Nice.
Because I don't have somebody telling me, hey, Nineveh, you're the VP of marketing and PR, and here's your team. No, it's not the case. I actually have to go out and hire people, bring on contractors, build the vision for what the marketing engine at his company is going to look like. I have to lead that team. I have to get, project manage, and all of those things are actually very entrepreneurial, right? There's nobody calling me and saying, here's what you're going to do today. I have to come up with all of it. And I love that. So it's been really fun.
It's funny. So you're surrounded by entrepreneurs, your dad, your husband. By the way, your husband, John Madsen, who former NFL player, tight end for the Raiders, right? We'll get into that here in just a sec. But so you're surrounded by these entrepreneurs. I'm sure you're learning from them. They're learning from you. Is there anything that you do differently or disagree with their philosophy, right? Again, you're learning from them. They're learning from you. But is there anything that kind of sets you apart in the way you think or the way you do things when it comes to entrepreneurship from the two of them?
Sure. I mean, I think being a female, you bring a different things to the table, right? I mean, for my husband, I'm like his confidant. So, he talks to me about everything, including business, every day. And he's like, I've got this challenge. Like, what would you do? And I'm able to kind of help him take a step back and say, okay, let's not overreact. Let's see why this is happening. And so I'm like his advisor. I'm my father's advisor too, in many ways, because, he'll just call me up and just start talking about business. And that's the kind of relationship we have. We have a very different relationship than your typical dad-daughter relationship. And he's talking to me about business and strategy and all these things. And sometimes he'll bring up, issues with employees, and I'll just tell him what I think. I'm like that only person that will push back, right? Because imagine as an employee, when you have a boss, you don't want to ruffle too many feathers, right? Yep. But I have the capability to be pushed back and be very opinionated, and he can get mad. That's okay. He'll get over it, right? And I think being able to be, that transparent with each other is an asset to both of them, my father and my husband. I just tell them how it is and give them a different perspective on how I would do things. And I think with women, I don't want to say it's like a female male thing, but organizationally, I would say that is lacking with a lot of male entrepreneurs. Sure. I don't know. What is it like for you as far as like organizing your systems and everything?
It's the same way, right? I feel that, I have a lot of ideas and a lot of things, and I'm good at a lot of different things. But when it comes to the details and the organization, even though my wife's not an entrepreneur, she handles a lot of the smaller details that I, for whatever reason, haven't or cannot do. So yeah, no, I agree. And I see it in a lot of different relationships with other friends that it's the same way.
Yeah. So women rock in that way. They're they're very organized. They're maybe dealing in the numbers. They're dealing in the tasks. They're dealing in the day-to-day. It's something that typically, like for my husband, that overwhelms him, but for me, it's like, I have to know what's happening day in and day out. Systems are very important, and so I think that's something that I've been able to bring to the table that wasn't there before. Even with my father's company organizationally, I thought, okay, we have to streamline the way that we're communicating as a company, because you have team members in California, in Ukraine, Germany, and then like one random person in Salt Lake City. But I love it. And what's great is I'm able to hire a lot of female contractors. So I'm very conscious about trying to bring more women involved in my company, Her Magazine, and with my father's tech company, so that we have that diversity, and that diversity of thought too.
I love it. So now, being married to another entrepreneur, good, bad, somewhere in the middle, right? Depends on the day, I guess.
I love it. There's, Ever, I mean, being a business owner is really tough. So John played in the NFL. He's got an incredibly inspiring story. Everybody loves him. He's an amazing guy. And I'm not just saying that because he's my husband, but he really is a great person. Just a great human being. But I've been there with him since the beginning of his entrepreneurial journey. So I met him after his NFL career was over. And I always kind of say, I met him. It's not like he had millions in the bank. I'm like, woohoo.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love the guy. I've loved him from when he had nothing to, what he has now. But I've seen him go through the journey, and he'll be very honest about owning and running a gym and how many times we had to shut down the gym and then go back to just him being like the solopreneur trainer. And there were often times that he'd come to me and say, what do I do? Like, there's no money, there's no money in the bank account. Like, it's all dried up. And that, being a woman and working woman, he'll say how helpful it is that I've also been very successful, because in the times when his business was doing bad, I was able to step up and, keep everything moving and going. There were times that he would come and he would say, what should I do? Should I just get a job? And I'm like, no, you are not getting a job. You are an entrepreneur. You are not going to do the 9 to 5. That's not who you are.
It's funny because a lot of times the spouse is like, yes, it's time. You tried. It didn't happen. Now go get a job. You're saying no. You're like, no. Let's stick this out.
I'm like, hell no. I did not marry the 9 to 5 guy.
Yeah.
Okay. That's more what it is. I'm like, damn it. You said you're going to make this happen. Right. So you're going to make it happen. And we've had a lot of tough times, definitely during the marriage financially because of being business owners. And there were times when we're like, should we sell the house? I mean, we've been through all of that, but thank goodness, we stuck through the tough times, and now business is doing really, really well for him because he finally figured out I can't be the trainer if I want to scale. I have to be able to bring in a team and start to leverage and build a team and expand that way. I can no longer be the solopreneur because there's a cap to how much money I can make. And what I'm doing, training athletes, is seasonal. And so we know there's 3 or 4 months out of the year where there's literally no money made. And you can't operate that way.
And by the way, those that are listening, we're going to have him on the show in the next few months. To tell his story as well, so stay tuned for that. But this is, I like how open you are with the success, but especially with the, hey, no money in the bank at times. We struggled. We couldn't do this. We couldn't do that. Like, it's funny because a lot of times we have people on the show, or just in general in public, on Instagram, on social media, that kind of stuff, where they paint a beautiful picture and they don't let others in. But I think letting others in when we're struggling, when we have failed, and tell that story, it's going to help more people, right?
Yeah.
Saying, "Hey, listen, we've been there, we failed, but now we're on the way back, or this is how we did it." That's such an inspiring story that you're able to open up and say, "Yeah, we couldn't do it for a little while, but we kept at it, and we didn't get 9 to 5s, and now we're making it." That's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I mean, those are the stories that I'm personally inspired by. I think it's hard to be vulnerable and open up and admit, failures, but, failures are just learning lessons. They're great teachers. And I notice the same thing in the entrepreneurial space. I think it's one of the things that really bother me is reading these stories about people who have this picture perfect life as a business owner. And I always say to my dad, what's wrong with me? Why are they making millions and I'm not making millions yet? And he'll just kind of say, Nineveh, it's BS. Yeah. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. Let me tell you how this goes down. I've lost businesses. That is the story of the entrepreneur. It's not the overnight success. He's like, that's like 1 in a million. Yes. It happens, but it's very rare. And, so, yeah, I think it's important to share that. Otherwise, you paint a false picture of what entrepreneurship is like. And it's not easy, but I wouldn't have it any other way, right?
Well, listen, you're inspiring female entrepreneurs all over the world, not just female entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs in general, males included, right? with the success and the ups and downs and things like that, what kind of advice overall would you have those that are listening that are in the trenches right now trying to make something happen?
Oh, I'm going to pull up actually a quote because I know you said to have one of those available, but I feel like this is the perfect time to bring this up. I just recently wrote a blog and it's called "What Does Your Perfect Life Look Like?" And one of the quotes that I have pulled out is, don't give up what you want for what you want right now. So a lot of us operate in, I want it now, I want this right now, without thinking about what you want down the line, like 5 to 10 years from now. So I talk in this blog, I talk a lot about like finances, for example, too, and just being really disciplined with money as well, and how we get really distracted, especially with this day in social media, with seeing these, the picture perfect life and the fabulousness of, the grand cars and, the big houses and the nice kitchen countertops and all these things. And we're getting distracted even as entrepreneurs, right? That's what being a business owner looks like, that you're just this full of wealth, and wanting those things is fine ever. It's totally cool to want those things. It's natural to desire those material things. But I think what happens is we're trying to, quote, keep up with the Joneses, or trying to prove something to people that don't even matter at the end of the day by buying the bigger house, by really stretching yourself because it's what you want right now without keeping in mind what it is that you ultimately want. So instead of focusing on getting the bigger house and getting the nice car right now, say, what is my 10 to 20 year game plan? What is my balance sheet? What do I want my balance sheet to look like? What do I want my net worth to look like? What's most important to me? Health, right? Because without health, you can't do anything. And feeling financially fit, not being financially stressed. So these are lessons I've learned from my father. The guy does incredibly well. He's incredibly successful. I don't know what his net worth is. It's none of my business. But I'll tell you what, he lives in a condo, okay, in the Bay Area, mind you. But I have friends here in Utah that live in more expensive homes than my father, and he's been able to tell me, and he owns properties and things like that. So he's really big on, long-term vision, building like a financial fort around you to protect you in case anything goes wrong. And he says, don't focus on like the bigger house and the nicer car. Focus on building that financial security for yourself in the future. So I say, don't give up what you want for what you want right now.
That's legit. That's what separates we all want to be successful, right? But that's what separates those that truly are successful with those that, pretend that they're successful, whether by the way they dress, the cars they drive, that kind of stuff. Because it's not, for the most part, going to happen overnight. And so I love that advice. I love that this is something that you are able to you're very passionate about it. And obviously you see it and you've lived it and you're living it right now.
Yeah. And it feels so much better, by the way, Ever, when you just operate that way, when you stop trying to prove yourself to other people. And it's like, cool, you have a Louis Vuitton bag. I have one of those too, but I don't need 10 of them, Yeah. Why?
That's funny.
You have the Mercedes, I'm driving the Jeep, but I probably have more money in my bank account. It's just knowing that. When you know that, you just don't care anymore. I don't care, and I think people need to stop caring what other people think about them, and they need to stop trying to do what they're doing to prove something, because you'll never be happy if that's how you operate.
You're the real deal. I love that we were able to connect on the show. I love your words of wisdom, just your whole vibe in general, where it feels like you've been there, done that, and now you're starting to give back, especially with Her Magazine. We're fans, and we love it that you came on the show. For those that want to connect with you, learn a little bit more about you, Her Magazine, and everything else you're doing, where can we find you online?
Okay, so Her Magazine can be found at hermag, so hermag.co, hermag.co. And you can find me on Instagram, Nineveh Dinha, though. which is my maiden last name. But just type in Nineveh, Dinn, Madsen, whatever in Google, and all my social media profiles will pop up. And I love connecting with people. I love talking to people on social media. It just, that gives me joy. So I'm the kind of person is, if you're going to email me or you're going to hit me up in a DM, I'll always respond, unless you're being a jerk, then I'm going to just block you. But for the most part, I love conversating with people. So I'm an open book on social media, just like I am being on this podcast. And I think, that's how people can find me. So definitely connect and check out her magazine.
I love it. So Outliers, you can go to outliermagazine.co. That's outliermagazine.co. First of all, subscribe to the podcast, rate, review it, share with your friends. But there you're going to find a show notes page, links to Nineveh's social media, website, everything else that you need to find about her will be on there. Share it. She's obviously the real deal. Nineveh, we appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, again, for everything that you've been able to discuss here on the show. We wish you much success, and no doubt that we're going to have you back on the show in, next year, a year from then, and see what else you're working on.
Awesome. Thank you, Ever. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Outliers, we'll talk to you tomorrow.